everyone, it's Kate here. I am here for your nightly bedtime story from Porter Square Books, and tonight I will be reading a short story by Diana Wynne Jones from her collection Unexpected Magic. And this story is called The Green Stone. It's a really fun fantasy short story. I love Diana Wynne Jones. I think she's just was one of the most creative voices in fantasy for a really long time. So I'm excited to read this story for you. Thanks for tuning in. The Green Stone. The heroes were gathering for the quest in the inn yard. It was chaos. Since this was my first quest as recording cleric, I was racing around among them trying to get each hero's name and run down my checklist with them. They tell me more experienced clerics don't even try. Half of them were barbarians who don't speak any language I knew, large greasy fellows in the minimum of leather armour, with a lot of hairy flesh showing. Most of them were busy waxing and honing a variety of weapons, gigantic swords whose name they insisted on telling me instead of their own, monstrous cudgels, 10-foot spears and the like. Every one of them was also shouting for provisions and equipment and running about for last-minute extras. There was a constant tooth-splitting din from the grindstone, where a squat person with a long grey beard was carefully putting a surgical edge on an axe blade as wide as his own shoulders. "Rono!" I screamed over the din at a tower of muscle in a leather loincloth. "Is that your name or your sword's name?" He was in a bad mood. He had been waiting half an hour for his turn at the grindstone. He glowered and fingered what looked like a shrunken human head dangling from his loincloth. "No, name secret," he snarled. I wrote Rono ? On my tablets and went on to my checklist. "And are you aware of the nature of the quest? We travel in search of the green stone of Katarine." Ja, we go now," he said. "Not quite now," I said. "We wait until the king comes to give us his personal blessing." In view of the screaming chaos in that yard, I was rather glad the king hadn't arrived yet. "And are you properly aware of the difficulties and dangers? The green stone is in the hands of a powerful wizard and can transform fatally anyone who touches it." "I know," he bawled. "I hero." Yes, I said hurriedly. His hand was meaningfully caressing that shrunken human head of his. I went on down my list. "And you have proper equipment, weapons, armour, warm clothes? It will be cold in the mountains." He glared at me. I gulped. "Well, you ought to have a warm cloak at least, and transport. Have you a horse, dragon, or other means of conveyance?" Here I was rudely interrupted by a very large female who plucked me by the shoulder and spun me away from Rono ? Apart from the fact that she had added a leather bra with knobs on, she was dressed just like him, mostly in a big sword and shrunken human head. I stared into her grubby navel, shaken. She was big. "You try coddle my little brother?" she demanded. No, I said. "This list, I have to make sure everyone has what's on it. Name, please?" "Name secret. We walk. We carry nothing," she said. I hoped that keeping up with the horses would warm them up in the mountains, and scuttled quickly on to the next hero. He was a suave young man in a turban who had brought a camel to ride. The creature was something like a mouldy hearthrug on long, knobbly legs, out of which stuck a long neck with a temper worse than Rono ? On the end of it. It made 3 attempts to bite me while I was finding out that the young man was called Haroon and that he carried a talisman of some kind. He didn't actually say, but I assumed he was our statutory magic user. I wrote down magician ? And dodged away among the crush, worrying about it. We really had to have a magic user. I couldn't control this lot on my own. I made another attempt to collect the name of the person monopolizing the grindstone, but he couldn't hear me for the noise he was making, so I wrote down dwarf, because he obviously was, and reckoned that with that axe he was certainly properly equipped. I skirted an argument, 2 horses, and an aggressive griffin, and found we had a harpist at least. He was seated on the horse trough, strumming inaudibly, a very pleasant young fellow with curly hair who said his name was Trouvert. There was a smiling man with white teeth next to him, carrying a pack. But when I tried to take this one's name, he turned out to be a tinker come to see his friend the harpist off. Embarrassing. But I felt better when I spotted a tall figure in a cowled cloak a little way off beside one of the store sheds. That had to be our magician. I hastened up to him. Name, please. His hooded head turned, giving me a glimpse of piercing eyes staring at me across a hooked nose. Why? He said. Does it matter? I have to have you all down in my records, I explained. How diligent, he said. Then I am Basilius for your records. His tone was deeply sarcastic. I knew it was a false name, but I wrote it down anyway, with the usual query. I was just turning away when a tall, pallid figure leapt out through the door of the shed. Don't go without me, he said breathlessly. I won't be long now. He was wearing some kind of apron and long gloves, both of which were dripping with something greenish. His right hand clutched a knife, also dripping green. Who are you? I said faintly. Pelham, he said. I'm your healer. You'll need me. Oh, I said. I'll be about 10 minutes, he said. I'm just finishing a post-mortem. Then he added to the cowled Basilius, You were right. The creature was definitely human once. After which he dived back into the shed. I wrote him down too, wishing I had not eaten breakfast, and went back to the rest of the chaos. To my surprise, it was beginning to sort itself out. The dwarf backed away from the grindstone, lovingly stroking his axe, and Rono, dived forward for his turn. Everyone else began climbing up onto their mounts. As recording cleric, I had been allotted a cart to ride, which had a cunning desk attachment I could swing over my knees so that I could go on writing down all things at all times. The cart was drawn by a highly opinionated mule, but nobody had thought of providing it with a driver. It was my turn to make some chaos. How on earth am I supposed to write and drive? I screamed. This mule is a full-time job. Am I expected to make an exact record of everyone's deeds while controlling the brute with one hand or something? Every hero stared reprovingly and then turned away. Clerics are not supposed to fuss. I was eventually rescued by the harper Trouvert, who pushed through the crowd and climbed smilingly into the driving seat. I'll deal with the mule, he said. I'm no hand at riding, and to be frank, I can't afford a horse anyway. While I was gushing grateful thanks at him, Trouvert dumped his harp beside me and collected the reins as if it was something he'd been doing all his life. The mule stopped trying to kick the front of the cart in and stood still. Now we were only waiting for the king to arrive and give his blessing. In the sudden hush, Pelham emerged from the shed again, without the gloves and apron this time. Looking pallidly smug, he whispered to Basilius and passed him a small bag. Basilius was clearly delighted. He patted the healer on the shoulder. Then, deliberately and jauntily, he climbed to a high mounting block by the inn door, where everyone could see him, even those like me, who had Haroun and his bad-tempered camel in the way. Basilius threw off his hood and flung back his cloak. There was a crown on his head, and the rest of his clothes were purple and ermine. I am your king, he said. Everyone gave an uncertain, muttering sort of cheer. He smiled. I was coming here, he said, to bless this quest on its way when I was attacked by a strange green man. I was fortunate enough to kill him. And when I examined the body, it reminded me very strongly of the hero Sagro, who went in search of the green stone a year ago. So I brought it here and I asked my royal healer Pelham to dissect the corpse. This is what we have been waiting for. Pelham cut the creature open and discovered that, in place of a heart, it had the green stone of Catarine. Here it is. He held up the bag. It only remains for me to thank you all very much for answering my call, and to tell you that there is now no longer any need for a quest. There was an instant of thunderstruck silence. Then a growl arose in a dozen languages. Such words as I could pick out were recompense, something for our trouble, and cost of travel, mixed with cries of swindle and cheat. Axes and swords were waved. I did not blame them for feeling cheated. This was my first quest. Though it had promised to be nothing but trouble, I found I was furious to be deprived of it. Haroon's camel seemed to have the same feelings. It vented bubbling howls and plunged about. My mule was not the animal to take such noises from a mere camel. It went for the camel, dragging my cart with it, Trouvere wrestling at the reins, Haroon wrestling at his reins, both laughing for some reason, myself screaming, every hero in the yard roaring. I had a glimpse of the king with the bag in one hand and the other making soothing gestures. The next glimpse I had of him, the bag was gone from his hand. The tinker leapt nimbly up beside me, flourishing a bag that looked just the same. "Got it, let's go," he shouted. Trouvere whipped on the reins. The mule forgot the camel and dashed for the yard gate. "Cover our backs, Haroon," Trouvere shouted as we thundered out into the town, and we galloped madly from under the noses of the heroes. We had been galloping almost ever since. Haroon caught up after an hour, laughing heartily. "The heroes didn't know what hit 'em," he said. "Never seen an angry camel before. Aren't you going to throw out that whinging cleric?" "Oh no," said Trouvere, if that is his name. "She can stay on and do her job. Let her write down how we get on against all the heroes the king is going to send after us." "Not to speak of the wizard who had the stone in the first place," said the tinker. "Don't forget him." "Then write, woman," Haroon laughed. "Write, or my camel may get angry." So, I write. And that is Diana Wynne Jones at the Green Stone. Thanks for joining me for our pretty much nightly story hour from Porter Square Books. We miss you all and hope to see you soon. Stay well, stay healthy.